other people hold it accountable, and there's sort of our organic versions of this. I think it's very difficult to get it from the top down. And you know, one of the, just to use the example of these various bubbles, you know, obviously one of the questions is, could you do something to regulate these things and stop them from happening? And on some level, if you could, this would be a very good thing, because obviously, you know, a lot of things went very badly wrong. But the problem is that you never quite know in advance what's going to happen and how to regulate it. And then in practice, it tends to be sort of a lot of the interventionist things end up being very pro-cyclical. So for example, to take the housing example again, it would have been good if the government had said people shouldn't be allowed to buy houses 3 years ago or 2 years ago. But that was politically impossible to do, because if you had said, I'm going to stop people from buying houses, you would be seen as someone who is stopping poor people from moving up in the world and getting a better place. And of course, once it's over, you can get the regulation, but it's very, very hard to do this in advance. So I think that I'm not sure there is a purely regulatory approach. So I think, you know, it doesn't mean you have no regulation, but I think it's very, very difficult given these things. And then you have, of course, a personal scapegoating dynamic on the part of people involved. So I asked one of the people on the Fed about a year ago, just before the housing thing blew up, whether it was possible to see bubbles, and whether they believed that you could see bubbles in markets and the world before they blew up. And of course, if you could see them, then presumably you could do something about them. And you know, what he told me is a little bit disturbing. It was, well, you know, on the record he said, well, you can't really see them, you can't see them at all. And then off the record it was, well, you know, it's a little bit more complicated, but by the time you can see them, they're so big that you don't really want to talk about them or do anything about them. Because if you do that, then when things go wrong, you're the person who gets blamed. So I think there are sort of all these things that make it very, very tricky. And I think there are serious problems with capitalism, and there are maybe at least equally serious problems with the alternatives.
I heard you say that, Peter, that it's irrational to think of the apocalypse coming and to invest in that with that mindset. It seems though we do have a situation where it appears to be completely rational to invest in ways that seem to bring on more likely apocalypses like global warming, and that people can make a lot of money investing in short-term things that clearly are making things worse very rapidly. I'm wondering, is there any way to deal with that situation?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously there are all sorts of things that lead to bad globalization. And I think I think that there are probably a lot of versions of it that are even shorter term problems than global warming is going to be. So I think the failure to develop alternative energy is a problem for global warming, but it also is a problem to the extent that the money goes to support governments that use it to buy weapons and do violent things. And you obviously have all sorts of ways where you can drill down on where the money is getting spent and how it is being spent. So is it okay to have diamonds, even if it means people are getting killed in the Congo to produce the diamonds? And it might be very profitable in the short term, but then it ultimately leads to a world where things go very badly haywire. So I think there are a lot of versions like this that are very, very tricky.
I've got a comment, maybe a question on good globalization, because I think it's a problem of mimetic desire that actually puts pressure on globalization because it works exactly maybe too well. And I think what is globalized is mimetic desire. If too many people want the same thing, then there's too much pressure on globalization as such. So I'm wondering if any kind of globalization can actually fulfill that promise. In a sense, it's like all the people want to win the lottery, but only a limited number of them can win them. So yeah, I think what is globalized is mimetic desire, and that puts pressure on. So yes, on good globalization in a sense. Just comment on that.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that mimetic is obviously, and I'm not sure all forms of mimetic desire, mimesis are bad. So it depends a lot on what the mimesis ends up being. So I'll give an example of one that I think is quite problematic, and then you can sort of ask what the alternatives to it would be. So I think one of the certainly political economic challenges, sort of rising wealth and income disparity in the U.S. and throughout the world, and one of the strange manifestations of it is the collapse of the savings rate in the United States. So in the U.S., savings rate at this point 0%. 20 years ago, it was still about 10%. So it's declined very, very dramatically. If you sort of break down where it has actually declined, it is basically among people in roughly the 70th to 98th percentile of income. So people below the 70th percentile were never saving any money. In the 99th percentile, they're still saving. And the 70th to 98th, it has completely collapsed. And one of the reasons it has collapsed is because people are trying to keep up with the people who are sort of one standard deviation better off than them, or the Joneses, however you want to call it. And as the standard deviation gets further, and the Joneses used to have a BMW, now they have a Mercedes, and you have a Toyota, you have to go into debt and spend more to keep up with that. Now, I don't know if all globalization has to lead to this sort of runaway desire. And so it seems to me that if people, I think one of the things that would be, will be very good for people psychologically in the 21st century would be if they, people who are more centered and where it's not quite as caught up in this vortex of runaway desire for things will do better and will retain their sanity. And the question is whether they destroy all those structures. But I think it really comes down to what role models one has, who you emulate, things like that.
Okay, thank you. You want to final words? Okay. Let's thank our guests.